Okay, great.
All right, so
welcome, folks.
Go ahead, Micah. Sorry.
That's okay. I run a few of these, so that I can, as the chair, I can start it off, and that's fine. Welcome, folks. This is the Residential Technical Advisory Group meeting for March 29th. So if you're in the wrong place, stick around. You might learn something. If you're in the right place, hopefully we'll have some good conversation and dialogue today on updating or looking at updates to the family child care facilities. So again, I'm Micah Chappelle. I am the Technical Advisory Group Chair and representing code officials on the State Building Code Council. And if I could have staff introduce themselves, and then we'll verify we have a quorum and then allow additional introductions. Thanks.
Stoyan, I'll yield to you.
Stoyan Bumbalov, I'm the State Building Code Council Managing Director, and I will be here for about hour and 15 minutes, but the important person for this project is Dustin, so I'll let him introduce himself.
Good afternoon. My name is Dustin Kerb. I'm fairly new with the SBCC staff, joined in September, and have been working IRC, IBC, IFC, UPC, and WUI. But I've also been working with some folks talking about some potential changes to the family home child care provisions, and the IRC mainly does have a small effect in the IBC as far as definition goes. And I will use some of the IBC base language to kind of maybe just kind of paint some background for the provisions we have today.
Before we start with the roll call, I want to make the same clarification. So we will have the residential code technical advisory group. We will be looking for a quorum, but we also invited the fire code technical advisory group members and some of the IBC technical advisory group members. So you folks are always welcome, and we will appreciate your feedback.
All right, with that one, I'll go ahead and start with the roll call. I'll do a roll call for the residential tag, and then just as a informational, I'll do a roll call for the fire tag members to see who is here. So with that, I'll start off with residential tag. Micah Chappelle.
Yes, here.
Jennifer Eliuk.
Here.
Kuyen Tai.
Here, but maybe a clarification. I'm the secondary to Jen, so I don't know if I would be counted towards the it'll be like a double count, I think.
Gotcha. Stoyan, as far as procedural goes, would we count Kuyen as a part of the quorum?
No, only Jen.
Gotcha. All right, Ron Perkowicz. Todd Short. Michelle Yee. Darren Watkins. Annie O'Rourke. Darren Graham. Damon Doyle. So with that, we've got 3 folks here from the residential tag. We don't have a quorum as of yet. If I notice we get more folks in the meeting as it goes on, I'll let you know if we pass that quorum mark.
And currently, we don't really need a quorum because we're not making major decisions. So the intent of this technical advisory group is to have the discussion. And if we don't have the quorum when we need it, then staff will take into account our comments received, and we will move it to the next step. But I don't expect we will be able to complete everything today, so that's okay.
Gotcha. Now for the fire tag representatives, I've got Tony Doan, Kuyen Tai.
I'm here for that.
And am I pronouncing that correctly, just as a courtesy?
It's Quinn.
Quinn. Okay, I will have that down for future.
I'm the only one allowed to mess it up with the names.
That's right. I was reprimanded earlier. No. Corey Thomas.
I think I saw him.
He is
somewhere.
here in the group and he's unmuted, but I haven't heard. He might just be away from the desk.
Oh, I'm here. Hello.
Oh, I hear you.
Okay.
Mike Six. Ricky Campbell. Ken Brulette. Dave Cocott.
Present.
Kevin Marr. Zach Tuck. Chris Seaman. Roger Heringa. And Paul Clark.
Here.
And that concludes the fire tag roll call.
Thanks, Dustin. Looks like we have possibly one guest. Is that Ty? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Ty Jennings, Cascade Natural Gas, just also staying involved with Washington State Code.
Awesome. Thanks, Ty. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking the time out today. Well, it looks like we have Todd popping on. So I know we're not technically taking votes today, but my understanding of reading the bylaws is that we could take votes, since if we don't have we can make a recommendation by voting majority of the quorum that is here. So that's my understanding. But again, the only thing we need to vote on would be the minutes, not the minutes, the agenda. So let's review and approve the agenda, the nice short agenda to discuss the off-cycle rulemaking. And is there any objections to the agenda? And if not, can I get a motion to approve?
Well, if we don't have the quorum, then it can't be approved. We need a quorum in order to have a motion and have a vote.
Okay. I thought that could be my majority vote, the bylaws say, but that's okay. If you, I'll leave it at that. We'll move on to the discussion.
Gotcha.
And do you want to start that, Dustin?
Yeah, I was going to introduce the topic of increasing. Well, we've had a request from the Department of Child, Youth, and Family. I'll refer to them as DCYF from here on out, to increase the limit of 12 children allowed in a family home child care to 18. They know it's a big ask, and we've been talking about potential provisions to justify the increase. And so I have some stuff to show you guys. They're making some changes to their WAC. We've got some potential code language proposed. And as a quick background, I would just kind of like to talk about what the provisions are today and kind of where they come from. And, so I'll break off first by sharing with you guys this is the 2021 IBC. These code provisions are very similar to the 2018 IBC, what we've currently got adopted and effective here in Washington. And so the model code language allows for 5 or fewer children in a dwelling unit as far as a Group E daycare facility to be either classified as an R3 occupancy or comply with the International Residential Code. I want to bring into just everybody's attention that number 5 and point out a clarification. I would like to maybe have the tag group discuss a little bit in the current adoption of our current stuff. And so some of the other provisions that affect this reclassification into the International Residential Code are the Group I4 daycare, or I might have the terminology wrong. Let me get to the I4 section. The Group I4 daycare facilities with the 5 or fewer persons receiving care in a dwelling unit, you have the same reclassification as R3 or base international residential code. If we go into the IRC, we do have an appendix in here for home daycare, which is talking about 5 and above. Where the heck is that? It's Appendix AM in the 2021 code. So this is intended to apply to scenarios where daycare is provided to more than 5 children. So this is kind of the appendix that the model code provides to everybody if you want to go above 5, and provides some additional requirements for a home daycare if you go over 5 children. In my reading in the base code is that if you are 5 or less, there's no extra provisions for you to comply with in the residential code. And I want to talk about that with our current adopted amendment. I'm going to change my share screen now to our WAC. I believe you guys should be seeing WAC 5151-0331. Can I just get a clarification?
I see it.
Okay, awesome. So there in the discussion with the work group that I've been talking with DCYF and some other building officials, and in conversations I've had with Stoyan as well, I think that there is some clarity lacking in this code language. And one of the first questions that came out in our discussion group was whether or not this modified code applies to all family child care, or whether or not this comma that comes after more than 6 children is where the is. So if you have more than 6 children, this amendment applies. And when I first was reading it, I took it to mean that if you have up to 6 children, model IRC code without this amendment would apply to your home child care. So that's one question I have for the tag to consider. And then the rest of it is that's just to kind of clarify where we are with the code today. And then as far as increasing the limit from 12 to 18, we've got some potential code language in here where we're trying to increase the life, health, and safety aspect for a larger occupant load. And I can kind of share that with you, and then also share a little bit with the WAC revisions that the DCYF is proposing to also help justify the increase in occupant load in a family home childcare up to 6 or up to 18 children. So if anybody has any questions for me, or would like me to just go ahead and share the code language that we've kind of got drafted up, I would be happy to address questions or show stuff that we've been working on.
And that's open to anybody in the meeting.
It sounded like your first question was going to be, though, do we even agree on where the, the applicability and the definition here?
Well, it's a question that came up where there's dissenting opinions within the work group, and I think it would be important to clarify for future code language if the two differing viewpoints are which one is the correct one, even though we don't have an official opinion request from anybody.
Okay, so you're not curious about what our opinion is, just that
well,
that
I
should
am
get clarified as part of this, which I agree
Yeah.
should be clarified if there's any question to it.
Well, I would be definitely curious what everybody's opinion is on it.
I've always interpreted it the same way, that it's over 6 children, then these requirements apply, but it's not explicit like you said.
Yeah, I concur that I read it as once you're over 6, then this is what you have to follow. Dave Cocott, by the way.
So I did have some code language drafted up that kind of was in the spirit of the interpretation where if you have family home childcare up to 6 children, that the base IRC would be your route of compliance. And then I have another draft that shows that for up to 6, the main difference would be the number of exits you have for that operation. So that was the main difference, is that this whole thing applies to up to 6. Just if you're over 6, you have 2 exits. So I guess it'd be beneficial to show the kind of language that I've been putting together with the folks at the work group to everybody at this point.
Yeah,
10-4. Oh, and just one more side note, I wanted to talk about what Oregon does. Oregon doesn't allow more children. They actually make their code more restrictive. And they pretty much, I do believe, are requiring sprinkler systems in any home child care facility. And I have some, it should be attached in our meeting documents as far as what Oregon does for that one. I just thought it was one of our neighbors has some easily accessible code language on that. So let me get our next document up. Okay. So here I have some language. I took the liberty of breaking a lot of this out into smaller subsections instead of having one giant section for the whole section for home family child care. As I was drafting it and looking at how to make changes, I thought it was a little easier and made it a little easier for the end user to be able to, apply these provisions to their projects. So as we still have the definition would remain largely intact. We would the DCYF is seeking 18. One of the talking points in the work group from the building official kind of side of the and enforcement side of the conversation table was that 16 is a much more recognizable number within the building code already. And so DCYF took that into consideration and is still asking for 18 with the understanding that 16 might be acceptable. So I would like to keep 16 in mind if it's something that we can work for. And largely just the number changed in the definition. And this would be the major change within the IBC as well as the definition in the number within the definition. The section would still remain section R331, family home child care. You'll notice that within this section 331.1, smoke alarms and heat detectors is kind of a new clarification within inside this one. The highlighted section here for heat detector was one of the things that everybody in the work group could have agreed on. As far as a provision to increase a little bit of awareness and safety within the building. As it is, the DCYF has a checklist and they're asking that, people who are looking to have these facilities within their homes go to the local jurisdiction and try to get an inspection to say that they qualify with some of these provisions in the building code and some of the other checklist items that they have in their WAC. The heat detector was something that we agreed on could be placed in the kitchen instead of a smoke alarm. And, we looked at different kinds of units that go in there and either a rate of rise unit or a set point unit could be placed in the kitchen to provide a little additional warning should a fire break out in the kitchen. Smoke alarms were determined not to be feasible in there due to the way that they are activated and you'd probably get a lot of nuisance alarms if you put these types of alarms in there. And then the different kinds of alarms that you have and the proximity requirements, they wanted to make it a little bit easier for the home child care providers to be able to put in something and know that they're meeting the code instead of having the question, and ease of inspection as well was discussed in that portion of the meeting. Carbon monoxide alarms, a lot of this stuff is base code. We looked at, not base code, but it's already required. So we're trying to avoid a change of use from IRC to IBC, occupants E or I. And part of this is to make sure that the current requirements for smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms are being met with the addition of the heat detector. And so we broke that out from some of the interior of the current existing code, just to clarify that we're looking for this in these types of uses. Some of this this next section, napping rooms and hazard separation, is the same as it reads in our current amendment. It's just broken out to be its own thing. So, all the napping rooms in any home child care facility are going to have to meet this requirement. Any of the hazards that are identified in the 331.4 is just the same as our current amendment, and all of them have to meet this requirement. This next section, 331.5, family home child care up to 6 children. The current document I have is written in the spirit of most of the amendment that we have current applies to family home child care up to 6 children. And it's reads pretty much just the same. The main difference is going to be in compared to 331.6, the number of exits that you're going to have within there. Any questions so far? I got a hand up from Micah.
Yeah, I kind of had a question. And you could probably answer this, or somebody from the work group. Are these requirements cumulative? Because the way I read how you're laying this out is only those that have 7 to 12 children have to comply with, would only have to comply with 331.6. It doesn't indicate that they have to comply with the rest of 331 as a whole. That's how I read it when it's laid out this way. And maybe I'm, again, reading it incorrectly. Maybe other people don't read it that way, but that's how I'm reading it.
It is intended to be cumulative.
Okay, because how it's written, I wouldn't get there as a code official.
Well, Mike, it does say in addition. So that first 2 words, in addition to the requirements.
In addition to the requirements of this section, not in addition to the requirements of above. It says in addition to the requirements of this section. So this section to me is only 331.6.
But you got to keep
again, the way it reads, I don't know if I'd get there. Some people might. I just question that.
Keep reading to the end of the sentence. All of the requirements of section 331.3.
I get what Micah is saying, because this is different than how the rest of the code is written. Because typically this section literally only applies. So a common sense reading from somebody in the public reading this, they would get there, but we have certain kind of methods or practices already in the code, and this is different than that.
Yeah, if it works, that's fine. It just
Yeah, I mean, it still says it at, if you keep reading it to the very end, it does say it's cumulative.
And I'm perfectly fine with entertaining a switch up in addition to the requirements of section 331.3. The requirements of this section shall apply as well, or whatever makes it, so that you get that this is a cumulative, on top of the stuff you just read in the code. Everything that it was, instead of writing out the entire section for each, kind of grouping of children, which is kind of how the first draft went, so that you say, yeah, I've got all these requirements, and it kind of made it visually, digestible. But as far as saving text and all that, some of the further revisions were to make it a cumulative code text so that we don't have as much in there. And Dave?
Yeah, definitely. I think I have some concerns just of how it was written, because it's not very often I agree with Micah, but I do this time. Because it does say, in addition to the requirements of this section, I do understand this is section R331. So if somebody were to look up the other page, it says section 331. But that's not necessarily how the code is done. And it only refers to all the requirements of section 331.3. So all you'd have to do is napping rooms. Wouldn't deal with smoke alarms, wouldn't deal with carbon monoxide, hazard separation, or the egress, other than you need a second egress. So yeah, we need to reword that so that it basically says inclusive of sections blank through blank.
Thank you. I think I know where you're trying to get to, and folks just read it different. So I appreciate all the input.
So
Thanks for agreeing with me, Dave.
to me, there's like the concept first of what are the core things that we want to change about the code, and then the wordsmithing. And I feel like we're doing like we did with the tag, this whole process. We just dive into the deep end of the wordsmithing, and I'm back at like, I'm not convinced at all that more kids is okay in these houses based on my experience as a plans examiner. So and that's how I felt the whole tag process, that I didn't even get a chance to say like, I'm not really comfortable with this, because we're right into how are we going to amend it to include this stuff, and then we're going to wholesale accept it or not. So could we like just back out and have that primary discussion of like what is being proposed to change, and like in order to accommodate more children, and do we think that's even okay? And then we can do the brain damage of the wordsmithing later.
I would love that. I think that, so in my personal opinion, I don't think that the proposals justify the increase. My opinion is that we're already increasing from the model code from 5 to 12. And then what we have proposed here in this document as far as increases in code language don't get us to where we need to be. But if we had some other suggestions, that would be great. One of the big things that they don't want to do is they don't want to put a sprinkler system in.
Yep.
Some
Okay.
other
I'll
things.
just say straight out, I am not accepting it without sprinklers. This is going from a home to a business. And so it needs to be protecting those kids. I'm willing to do an NFPA 13D, because that's not designed to protect the building. It's designed to get the people out of the building. But I am not going to accept anything. I'm not going to allow the increase without fire sprinklers, period.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for the input, Dustin. And Jen, thanks for pointing that out. I agree with you there. I will stop wordsmithing it at this point, because I'm on the same page as you. I question whether or not we should even be going this far. And then we do have a hand up, Quinn. Thank you.
My question is kind of like what Jen, can we go all the way back? I don't have a history on why we even added this whole section into the IRC. Kind of like what Dustin was saying, is that, we've gone from 5 to all of a sudden adding 6 to 12, when in theory, in the past, if we follow the model code, it should go to IBC. But are we trying to use existing inventory for these small businesses? Was that the initial intent of this whole change?
So the change to the current code, I don't have the best background on that one. That one's been on the books for quite a while. As far as the current request to increase in 2020, with the advent of COVID-19, a lot of the commercial daycares closed shop, and there is a need for childcare across the state, and they're looking for getting more in-home without necessarily having to build and do a lot of renovations. And the money's been kind of tossed out as a reason why the people who are doing the provision or providing for these want to make more money, which I don't think is a justification for increasing the allowance of children in there. But there is a shortage of childcare availability in Washington due to COVID-19 at this point.
I want to add and if there is somebody, I'm sure there is more knowledgeable than me on that, but there is a state law that allows the Department of DCYF. Okay, sorry, can't remember it. That allows the department to increase, and this is related to licensing, to go above 12. And I didn't attend all meetings that the work group had, so Dustin can add, I guess, more information on that. But you know, the department is approving these childcare facilities, and there are approvals with facilities with 32 or 35 kids. So we were expecting, I mean, I wasn't here at that time, but reading the old emails and the information, I assume the council was expecting a proposal to be submitted after this law was enacted in 2021, I believe, but no proposal was submitted, and there were some conflicts between what we have in the residential code and what the department was doing with the licensing. Again, I'm not the technical expert on this, so if there is somebody else more knowledgeable than me.
So let me see if I could paraphrase what the history is, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong. So initially, the state allowed DSYF to have up to 12, and then they came to the state tags and say, hey, you know, we have our policy for 12. Can you guys change your building code to reflect our policy? We said yes. Now they're coming back and saying, okay, we're changing our policy from 12 to 18 to potentially more. Now they're coming to us and say, hey, okay, we went to you guys before. Can you guys update your code to reflect our new policy? Is that how I'm reading all of this?
I would say that's a pretty good paraphrasing of the situation. You know, so they had a legislative, some legislation come down that says that they can issue waivers on the, so their WAC reads currently, you can get a license for a home child care for 12 kids. That's the base license. If they get the required paperwork into their department, they're allowed to issue a waiver. They do, you know, make some provisions to check for square footage, and there's some supervision requirements and things like that. But folks aren't taking these to the building departments, and when they are taking them to the building departments, they're getting shot down because there's nothing in our building code except for going to the commercial code for these types of projects.
Okay, so with that said, then I'm with Dave on this one, because I think we could kind of tie this in with, like, similar to adult family homes. They tried to increase it from 6 to 8, and we bent on that one, and we said, sure, give us some sprinklers. You know, so I mean, we could do the same thing with this.
And that was brought up in our meeting. So the Seattle building code official sat in on part of this, and, you know, they brought that up, that for adult family homes, you know, the compromise was sprinklers, and DCYF has, you know, shot right back. That is unacceptable for us, and we're not. So, I mean, I really think we're at an impasse with the sprinklers on here. One other thing that I tried to pass through them was, if you had more than 12 as a way to increase safety, is to not allow children in something that has more than 12 children on anything but the level of exit discharge. It wasn't really agreed upon, you know, they didn't get the terminology of what that meant, and so it was not included in this current draft. But I was of a mind for sprinklers, and, you know, there is a path forward for people who want more than 12 kids in their building. Nobody's ever told them, no, you can't do it. They laid out a path that they don't want to take.
Yeah, there's a path to getting to what they want to be able to do, and we've had the discussions with DCYF in the past as well. We've been very firm in our protecting those children, and I'm not willing to accept a reduction in safety so that somebody can make more money by having more kids in their home. It makes no sense to me whatsoever.
I'm already uncomfortable with them currently as they are, based on my, honestly, I am. So, I mean, to go above that, I would agree, sprinkler system.
Jen, I almost, I wanted to say, I want to adopt what Oregon did.
Yeah. Did you
100
guys
yeah.
have-
I
Yep,
like
I agree.
Oregon a lot.
I mean, the having them in the IRC at all, is already a give, right? It's like, look,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have kids over a certain amount, you're a facility at that point.
Yep.
This is a home, this is a house, and the when I get them for plan review, it's never a really good situation. They push back on the second exit. They're putting them in basements and stuff. So yeah, I think that we've already given, and that just because they got the cart before the horse, I don't think that we should just get kind of pushed into like, okay, well then let's just drag the requirements, because then we're really accepting it. And if this was done a little bit better and we would have been involved in the beginning, we would have said, no way, we're not going to go over 12 without sprinklers. I don't think they should have moved their licenses. I also completely get the need for more childcare. But they can put them in real facilities. And if a bunch of them closed down during the pandemic, that means a bunch of them are empty to be refilled now that there's all this business.
Well, just a little history, back in the early 2000s. It was in DCYF back then. They were the different group. They were for some other name. They required COs for all the daycares, and that closed hundreds of daycares across the state that had been operating for 30 or 40 years because they couldn't get a CO. It just kind of flabbergasted me that they're not recognizing that the safety is a big issue with this, because they did before. It said, you got to make sure you have a CO. If you're going to have kids in these buildings, it's got to be built to the codes. And now they're saying, well, can we relax the codes to get more kids in the building? It's not an equitable balance to me.
And some of them do have overnight care. Some of them are doing infant care less than 2.5 years. And so, I mean, they've kicked themselves out with some of those provisions into, building code territory, and need to comply with the IBC instead of IRC. And so we didn't get a lot of mileage out of propositions for justification. There was the heat detector in the kitchen, a monitored fire alarm, and emergency lighting, kind of tossed out as agreeable solutions, all fairly low cost to the building, but in my opinion, not justifiable.
Okay, thanks, Dustin. Thanks everybody for the input. So I guess we're still discussing whether or not we're even comfortable with that number. I know the 16 number is, that does come up quite a bit in the building code as a number, especially when we talk about different types of residential treatment facilities, residential care facilities. As some of you are aware, at the last tag meeting, the building code tag meeting earlier today, they were talking about getting 16 will be the R4 occupancy, bringing that back. And again, that's the 16 number. I'm not comfortable. The 12, I agree with Jen on this. Man, the 12, that's a stunning amount of children, in my opinion. Now, I know we're getting a few additional items, and it hasn't been a major problem since they've had this in the code for quite some time at the 12 number. But again, the increase, just because they changed their policy, what's the justification there? And if you're just, we need to have more of it. I said this in the last meeting of the building code tag. We're trying to change stuff just because we have to have more of it. And we're going, backwards to some extent, or lowering requirements. So I'm in the same page with Jen and Dave. I'm not comfortable necessarily increasing it, but if we are, you're going to have sprinklers. You're going to have all these additional, more robust items, because you are in that, facility territory, commercial facility territory, in my opinion. And, I'm definitely not comfortable going to 18. I might align the 16 number with the building code and be okay with that, considering if we get sprinklers and the other items. Thanks.
Hey, I got a question for Dave. Looking at the proposal here, would the monitored fire alarm, is that going to be a pretty robust system that would help mitigate some of the hazards?
Not necessarily. I mean, I kind of looked at that as the cost of that, having a monitored system is basically a fire alarm system, because you're gonna have a small panel to be able to handle the devices. We've been having a lot of issues with the security panels that are basically listed for fire alarm panels. I think that's what they're thinking they can be able to put in, but we're having some troubles with those systems. Todd, I don't know if you've run into that with your jurisdiction, but that's becoming a problem with us. We're actually going to be not allowing the security panels for fire alarm for systems anymore. So, Todd, do you have any comments?
Yeah, this is this is Todd Short. I work for the city of Redmond. I don't believe that the monitored fire alarm system, although it might be a little bit better, it doesn't really do anything for the escape time.
Yeah.
Other than a notification. Each of these homes really should have a local enunciating alarm anyway. And so basically then you would be notifying the fire department through the central station monitoring, which oftentimes the cell phone is faster anyway. It's very likely that they would be somebody would be dialing 911 when the local smoke alarm went. So although it sounds like it's really providing something, I'm not sure that it really benefits to what they're trying to achieve. I think that versus putting in the sprinklers.
That's
Yeah,
good to know.
I concur with that 100%.
Yep.
I kind of find it interesting as we're kind of looking at the higher numbers, but now we're also talking about the lower numbers too, though. So it is just an uncomfortable thing of being able to have our children in these facilities. And my kids grew up in both type of daycares. They had the family daycare, and then they went to the larger daycare just because it was more convenient to us and stuff as well. That was one of the daycares that had to close. They had to have sprinklers, but they didn't put sprinklers in, so they had to close. Well, I was definitely concerned about that because I thought they had met those requirements, but I didn't do an inspection of the facility. But these are, and I kind of find it interesting as we are talking about making sure each of the areas has an escape window. Doubt that most of these kids you can even figure out how to do it. There are those kids that will do it no matter what, but most of those kids are going to say, "Oh, I'm not going to the window. That's not safe." They're not trained in how to deal with a fire situation. So we're not dealing with regular older people that can respond to these things, and you're going to have the caretaker or caretakers, depending on the number that they have for the number of children that are there. They're going to be busy trying to grab as many kids and get out of that building as quick as possible before we have a pretty good sized fire. We could get flashed over in 3 to 4 minutes. So it's not a lot of time.
So I have another question, and this is just plain devil's advocate. This is going again at a high level. Is this a mandate by legislation? And if it is, if we are going to stick with our guns in terms of requiring sprinklers, are they going to shove this down our throat, even if we say no?
As far as I know, it is not legislative.
No,
This is not a mandate for the State Building Code Council. This is an exception or additional measure that the Department of Child, Youth, and Family can use. So
there
there
is legislation on their side to allow that waiver process.
yes.
But not on our side. Okay. Yeah, because I just don't want like what was the Plex homes, those residential homes that they're trying to shove down our throat. I just don't want something like that happening where, because we're stuck on one thing and then, we say no, and then all of a sudden it gets passed and we didn't get a chance to mitigate it with, okay, let's provide alternatives.
I don't think necessarily we're saying no, we're saying yes, but you have to sprinkle it.
I think that the path for them is already there. And I mean, if we wanted to, they wanted to term the process IRC plus and to require sprinklers in it. They weren't, I would agree with sprinklers. That's what I was hoping to get out of it, but they said no. But after this meeting, I would take back the conversation to them and let them know that without sprinklers, it's pretty much a dead deal at the moment.
And in terms of to help with the argument, children have those hoverboards, and I took that wobble class for ESS, and the hoverboards are going to be a lot more hazardous than anything else that because they're going to bring it, right? These are children toys. And if we say no, then all of a sudden it gets passed, and we didn't get a chance to mitigate it with, okay, let's provide alternatives.
I
And so those things are pretty much fire hazards. And I think I would agree, sprinklers would be, yeah, with the higher hazards, especially with those hoverboards.
Or cell phones. Cell phones got the same batteries in some of those as well too, so.
That's true.
Okay, so I guess today the question is going to be, I mean, we can still go through the language that Dustin has proposed, but it sounds like we can have a few main points, and I'll try to summarize those, and folks can correct me if I'm wrong. But our concerns are the increase period. Then the second comment is there will be, at least we don't want to see an increase without sprinklers. That's kind of that's almost a dead on arrival proposal. And then we do need to look at determining the number. I, of course, would push for the 16 to align with other parts of the building code that are 16. Again, and the whole R4 discussion we had today, that's 16. And that 16 would require sprinklers. So I don't understand why they'd even ask for us to do 18 and not require sprinklers. That makes no sense to me in the first place. And then I did hear earlier a point about limiting the number of children above the level of exit discharge. And I'm not sure if we explored that further, but again, that was a safety measure I heard earlier as well. And then we'll get into the monitor alarm and egress lighting. Sorry.
So the exit discharge conversation was talked about, but nobody really agreed on it. And so it wasn't written into this proposal, but I think it is it's part of the Oregon code that if you have where located within a detached 1 or 2 family dwelling or townhouse shall be constructed in accordance with residential code, and any room where a children is kept shall be on the exit of on the level of exit discharge. And that is
Did I miss anything there, folks, that we had concerned with? It's sprinklers and just the actual number itself. And we need to make that determination before we get into the weeds of the code change proposal.
I think you got it, Micah.
Okay.
I like the heat detector
right.
for all of them. I think the heat detector would be nice currently. The ones that we currently have, that's a super simple, cheap thing. And in the room where the fires are normally starting.
And I think we wanted that to be interconnected. So that might require some additional work or replacing everything in the house or dwelling. Just was part of the conversation on that one, is the just installing a heat detector. It's not interconnected. You might not hear it going off if you're in, I don't know, let's say the basement or whatever, where you have your
So they
playroom.
don't have those wirelessly like they do for the smokes?
They do. It's just that, if you've got, like, say, a kid brand and you get some other brand, it's not going to necessarily communicate.
Yeah,
But
that's what the central monitoring alarm is, that there'd have to be some kind of, it would have to be able to communicate to be able to get out. If there's an alarm there, it has to be able to communicate out with it. So it's the one advantage of having that. So yeah, I think the alarm is going to be more than what they probably were thinking of.
So Dave, what you're indicating is under the monitored fire alarm system here, we'd have to provide more information to ensure that additional heat detector or smokes are tied into that alarm, because I don't know if that says that.
What do you monitor? What is the alarm monitoring? It's got to be monitoring the detectors. So those detectors have to be interconnected and tied into be able to call out, say, hey, there's fire here.
Would we point back to a section of code that provides more information on that? Would you scroll back down, Dustin, to the monitor alarm? Because we're just saying right now, listed residential fire alarm. monitored residential fire alarm. Is that installation requirements or code standards somewhere that we can point to? I guess we're getting into the weeds on the section.
We didn't have much on, they didn't want to have like, a fire sprinkler monitoring alarm where it's going to, the fire station. They're looking more like ADT type systems. I can't remember some of the other brand names that were tossed out there. It was more about that, if the alarm is activated, the users are notified, not necessarily the emergency responders. I didn't necessarily like the UL or the residential alarms because it's more, I think, about trying to preserve the building in the long run than the getting the occupants out and safety of the occupants. I mean, yeah, you get notifications maybe on your cell phone or you'll hear the audible alarm, but I really didn't think that the monitored alarm, unless it was, even having the responders come fast to something like that, it doesn't help the occupants egress fast.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting what they would think with monitored UL based, because that is kind of like they're implying, well, maybe it's going to be a security alarm system that goes to an ADT. And the ADT calls the fire department. That makes it even worse because you're not really going to the department. You're going to somebody else who's going to then call back and say, hey, what's going on? Do this. And they want to try to limit as many false alarms as they can. And that's some of the troubles you've had with the security systems being used for fire alarm. So
And I would agree.
I think we agree. It's just not going to help.
And then
If
there's
anything, I was
the
gonna say,
or go ahead, sorry.
no, I was just gonna say, instead of saying UL listed, we should just reference the NFPA 72, because that is a reference standard in the IRC.
Yep, that'd be fine. And they do address single station, multiple station alarms. That's basically what we're talking about for the single family homes types of systems that do require the interconnection.
And one of the things I had an issue with these residential alarms was contract termination. So what happens if the monitoring goes dark? So with like the 72 systems, I do believe that the way they're monitored is if the contract is terminated, the jurisdictions are notified that, hey, this system's no longer being monitored, and then the building department goes out and does whatever the building department wants to do with that particular situation.
Right, or the fire department, because we'd be the ones monitoring the permits and use systems for that. So they would have to have a permit with us to be able to be tested on a regular basis, and we have a third party do the actual on-site testing, but they're always checking these systems are working.
So
Okay.
Micah,
Justin,
I
go
was
ahead,
gonna
Quinn.
say, Micah, for if you're taking notes on it, the two things that I think we're agreeing on is the heat detector needs to be interconnected, heat alarm, I mean, needs to be interconnected, and the monitored fire alarm, instead of saying UL listed, it should just reference the NFPA 72.
I've got those notes.
Okay, that's where I was going to get to. So perfect. Thank you for summarizing that, Quinn, for Dustin, and thanks, Dustin, for keeping that. All right, good point on that. So that sounds like we've kind of addressed 331.7.1. Maybe we should go back up to 331.6, and like I said, we're going to kind of get in the weeds, and I know we still need the overall determination if we're even going to move this forward and what we would be comfortable with. But I think we have that answer, is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we would move this forward up to, I think, 16. I don't know if that's the number for everyone, if they do sprinkler systems and all these other items that'll be listed here that we're going over. Is that what I'm hearing? Or I know, Jen, you were kind of mentioning you're not necessarily comfortable, but would you be comfortable at all moving from 12?
Yeah, I think I would also go to 16. I think that makes sense with the sprinkler system and these other items. For sure. We can talk about this number of exits and what 2 remote means of egress means.
Okay.
So we're thinking of putting the sprinklers in for the 7 to 12 and then the 16 to 18 or up to 16.
It'd be
I think
13
we
to
don't
16.
require that. Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's the over the 12, Dave, because I don't think we require the sprinklers already for the 7 to 12.
There is a provision for some things in there, but it's kind of, if you do this, then you might need sprinklers.
Yeah, I guess I'm still not comfortable as how we got to the 12 without sprinklers.
That was why I asked that earlier question. How did we even get here?
Yeah, because I think that there was the licensing request up to 12, but did the code actually change? Because I don't recall that.
No, this has been on the books since the uniform codes.
It's like that, Dave, because we weren't here in the 90s to shoot it down.
Yeah, but when we adopted the international code, I thought that we'd only went up to 6.
That's what that R331 is, though. That's a state amendment to allow the additional,
Mhm.
which is in there currently, yeah.
Okay, I'll still do some more looking to keep myself more comfortable with it. I haven't played with the IRC for a while, so that was Todd's job.
Yeah, blame me. I do have a question though, on 331, it's open-ended. It just says more than 6. So where's the 12 at?
That's in the definition, Todd.
Okay. And it looked like they were sort of looking at split levels, 4 feet below, 4 feet above, sort of accommodating a split level in regards to the sprinklers. So more than 4 below, more than 4 above required sprinklers. But same level, no. Possibly a split level, no.
And then, I mean, so this 331.5.1.3 exception 2, and then they have some provisions for stairways being configured a certain way to allow children on the second story of a, if you're more than 4 feet above or more than 4 feet below, or the sprinkler just kind of gets you there without having to do any modifications of the stairway configurations in there.
And that's current language.
Yes, sir.
So what I have seen primarily is like basements that they're converting, and then they have to add like an additional, they have to make those modifications. I've never seen anybody choose the sprinkler system over those other modifications.
Yeah, same here. I always see 2.2. They choose that one. The two required means of egress.
And section 903 in the building code does read a little bit interesting, where it's required in some of these areas where you don't necessarily have to sprinkle the entire building. You can sprinkle the floor that you have the daycare on, and anything below it down to the level of exit discharge. So there's some, maybe a little bit of relief there, but not a whole lot.
Thanks, Dustin. I'm kind of going back to what you were talking about, Jen, and make sure I'm not missing this. If you wanted to do 7 to or more than 12, you could go in and do the upgraded stairs and not do the sprinklers.
Now this is more
Because we
than
don't have the sprinklers.
the way it reads right now, and the way I think we all kind of agreed we would interpret it, is that if you have more than 6, so 7 to 12, you could do the stairway configuration or the sprinkler system to get them on the floors located more than 4 feet above grade.
Okay. And so what we need to add, and I know this is jumping ahead again, so we need to add under 331.7 that if they want to go to, say, the 16, you have to do the sprinklers. And I guess, how do we word that if this is cumulative? Because then at that point, they wouldn't have the options of 331.5.1.3 to do stairs. They would have to do sprinklers.
I like
We'd have
the
to work.
idea of keeping all the children on the level of exit discharge plus the sprinklers.
For even the up to 12?
No, for going above 12.
Right. So, but Mike is asking, how do we split this? So it's not, because it's not cumulative really. It's an either or. So I think that we need to put language above that first section that basically sends them to either, you know, if you have up to 6, you have these options, you have to do one or the other, or if you're above 6, 7 to 16, then you have a different list to comply with, and it's not options, it's sprinkler, 2 remote means of egress, you know, the alarm, all that stuff.
Thank you for verbalizing what I was meaning. Because that's what I'm meaning.
I know, I want to like edit this document. It's killing me that I can't just get in there.
When we're done, I can send this out to everybody and you could wordsmith a little bit if you'd like.
That'd be appreciated.
Okay. So I think we're kind of to a point, like I said, I don't know if we need the whole meeting, in my opinion, unless we want to sit here and really work on this and wordsmith it, but it sounds like we have some understanding of what we need to get to, or what we would like to get to, what we will accept. And we kind of have a start with some of what Dustin has put together here in this document. And of course, we've discussed some additions today and some additional notes that we can all work on before the next meeting. Am I summarizing that? Does that sound about right for everybody?
I think you're hitting it.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. And again, we could sit here and continue through the whole meeting, you know, discussing the language, or we can come back to, I don't think we have to finish everything today. We don't have a quorum to vote anyway.
You mean you don't want to talk about R4?
No, I do not, Dave.
Dave, stir the pot. Stir the pot.
Yeah, I need to keep my mouth shut a little more. You know, R4, I'm not against them. I think it'll be good. I think we just need to go through and finish the analysis to get there.
Yeah,
and I think
sat on my hands that whole meeting.
Don't sit on your hands. You just leave me out there and blow it in the wind, huh, Dave? Thanks. Okay. Coming back to it, is there anything additional we need to discuss on this today, Dustin, or do you think we have some direction on where we're going and what we need to work with?
Well, I've got some direction. I was gonna mess with it a little bit to try to make it a little more clear as far as the cumulative part. And then the only thing I think we didn't really nail down as far as I know we want sprinklers to go above 12, but as far as somehow, you know, separating it out so that when you go above 6, and let's say you've already got children on your second level and you've got a sprinkler system, can you justify more than 12 in that scenario? I don't think we've quite nailed that one down.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think once you go to 12, it's automatically a full building sprinkler. So if they have one floor that's sprinklered and they're going to increase it, well, they're going to go back, put sprinklers in the rest of it. So that's the direction I think they're talking about.
Right. I mean, the way this one reads, the exception is throughout the entire building already, if they are keeping kids on the floor above. So I almost feel like, you know, we've got the ask, and the only thing we can do is maybe take away the ability to take them above more than 4 feet above grade level, and just make the egress a little bit more timely. But even then, it's hard to justify even getting there.
I think the additional item would be that monitored fire alarm that they don't have.
For the NFPA 72.
Yep. So if they
Okay.
have
Yeah.
sprinklers with up to 12, and then they want to add more, because they already have sprinklers, the only additional item would be those 2 items you listed below already. So the monitor fire alarm and the lighting.
And then if they weren't above, they would still require sprinklers and a monitored alarm?
Correct.
Okay. I can work with that, and so I'll fiddle with this document a little bit to try to incorporate those ideas. And then once I get that done, I'll send it out to everybody so that if you want to play with it, we can talk about it at our next gathering. Which I guess, do we want to set that for next week? Or let me set up something to talk with the other stakeholders on this one to see if they are at an impasse already.
Yeah, let's see what we can work out with that. Because
Okay.
if I was kind of hoping to have a few more of the fire tag people, I thought there'd be some more people here, so.
Okay. So I would say let's maybe not next week, but the week after, try to set up our next version of this, or
Yeah, I was gonna say try not to do next week. I'm already booked, and part of that booking is I'm taking some time off, so I won't be available.
okay.
Hey,
That may be a
I'd
good
also-
thing for everybody. I don't know.
Well, and I think we want to hear what the other stakeholders have to say too before we meet again.
And they were invited to this meeting. I don't know if they just missed it, but I'm sure they were talking about wanting to attend, so I'll make sure that they are in attendance at our next meeting as well.
So Dustin, this is Todd. Just before we go, I wanted to at least say, if you're going to require the sprinkler system, you already have the sprinklers can act as the detector. So you could just simply monitor the sprinkler system, very easy to do, and then not go to the expense of the monitored NFPA 72 fire alarm system. I don't think we should necessarily be afraid of that option.
I think that's good input.
I do see Roger on the participants from DCI. I don't know if he's one of the stakeholders.
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm not, I'm just was planning on calling in, and I apologize for being late, and I was gonna give kudos to whoever's running this meeting, because it sounds like you got through everything you could in an hour rather than 2.
You
Surprised it was Micah.
Yeah, this is what I was gonna say. He is really efficient when he is running the meeting.
Crack the whip when it's not my meeting, or when it's my meeting. No, I'm totally kidding. No, we did. I think we did all good. I think we got through most of the information. The nice thing is there's not a lot of code sections here to discuss, and really we just have to determine some triggers and if we're going to approve those triggers before we really get into the verbiage of the code. So I appreciate everybody's time, and I appreciate the input. Dustin, if you can't get those modifications in, in a timely manner, and you just want to send this out to the folks, I know, there's a lot of us on here that would be happy to spend time helping you.
Yes,
Kind
I
of
will
formulate
work on
some of
them.
these sections sooner than later. So
I'll get them worked on today, and if whatever I can't get in there today, I'll shoot you guys out tomorrow morning.
fantastic. And again, I appreciate everybody's time. And I know there's some folks on here that haven't said anything, and I don't want to cut anybody off. We can stay here as long as we want. Is there any additional thoughts or input folks want to have on this before we adjourn for the day?
Come on, Corey, you gotta say something.
They might be eating lunch. I'm just kidding. Okay.
He went off mute. He went off mute.
This is Corey also. Good job, Dave, not talking so much on the.
Thank you. Okay. I appreciate it, folks. It sounds like we will meet in maybe another 2 weeks from now, or somewhere there, second week of April, and for another tag meeting. And I appreciate everybody's time. If you have any questions, please email me or Stoyan or Dustin, and we'll try to answer anything you need. So with that, we will say meeting adjourned.
All right.
Awesome.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dustin. Thanks,
You're
Stoyan.
welcome. Thanks again.
Appreciate the help. we'll talk to you. Like I said, email that out sooner or later, man. I'd be happy to assist, and I know the folks will too. I don't want you to be. I know you guys are tight with time on everything, so
Yep.
be happy to help. We can.
Well, I will do what I can, and then I'll shoot it out, and then I'll probably try to coordinate a meeting with the DCYF as soon as possible, and then set up for a week or two after that.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
Don't want to interrupt your vacation.
You're fine. It'll be partial. I'm always partial. I can't. I'll get too far behind if I take too many days off.
10-4. All right. You have a good one.
Thanks, you too. Bye.